Okay, thank you very much for joining us today for our iron deficiency and natural Ayurvedic remedies talk. And today we will be discussing symptoms of iron deficiency. So how would people know if they are iron deficient, or if people already know that they're iron deficient because the lab results showed that? What are the reasons for the iron deficiency? Are they getting enough iron in? And if they are, what's preventing the iron from being absorbed? And of course, there are various types of iron deficiency. And most importantly, what are the natural ways of alleviating iron deficiency and hopefully getting rid of it completely, because it can be a nuisance and a pretty debilitating ailment. So we will get started with Dr. Nature talking about all these things at length.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see everyone present, and those people who are not present at this moment will probably be seeing the replay of this webinar, which we are very happy to, so that many people know this topic and can integrate some of our recommendations in their lifestyle in order to balance and create a condition that enhances their health and helps them feel better and use their deserved and well-earned health to the goodness of their life, their loved ones, and the world. All right, so iron deficiency from standpoint of natural health and Ayurveda. We will be talking in details about that. We want to cover as much as possible, but at the same time, we want to cover everything and grasp the entire idea conceptually, so that we have the conceptual understanding of this situation, not just the detailed, because many people know some little details here and there. They know that the blood tests are off and here's my ferritin low or my hemoglobin low, or just general iron is off, but how would they put that in the entire picture to understand what is exactly the missing link or where to emphasize the effort in order to rebalance things and have it normalized and sustain it normalized? Because in many cases what happens is that people just start taking the supplements for iron. That's what the doctors prescribe, and they do it for some time, and once they're off of them, within the next few months or so, they end up in the same situation, being low on iron and continuing with that. And that means that we're not really taking care of the root cause, the complete situation, but just trying to patch little gaps here and there, which is also can be a way to go, but as a temporary measure until we're working to rebalance the entire system holistically. So that would be our standpoint of view of this, and let's begin understanding the entirety of this situation. So iron deficiency is a huge problem. We are now in a pandemic of iron deficiency around the world, especially in the middle-aged female population, and of course a male population, and especially the elderly population. All groups are affected by iron deficiency, whether they're just like regular eaters, omnivores, or people who are on a specific diet, vegetarians. It used to be considered that only the vegetarians, because they're in a high-risk group, because their diet is deficient of, or at least it was considered to be deficient on iron, because the iron is mainly in the animal products. And it is on one hand so, because the more bioavailable iron is in the animal products, but that iron, even though it seems like it's more bioavailable, in fact, that has to go through our digestion and may end up not being absorbed, even though the form of iron in the animal product is good, but that iron is already built in the organic animal tissue. The protein absorption doesn't work the way that we think. The tissue of the animal does not turn into the tissue of the human. The protein absorption happens through the very complex metabolic process where the proteins are broken down to the basic monomeric component, which is the amino acid, and then only they are taken for the build of the tissues and creating the proteins. Iron undergoes the same processing, meaning that for iron to be absorbed and utilized in the correct way by our body, we need to have very balanced and very strong digestion in order to absorb the iron into our system. Let's just understand what is the process of the iron journey through our body, and at what points there can be some inconsistency in this process of metabolism of iron. If the process is deficient at some point, then we would end up with a low iron, low hemoglobin, deficient erythrocyte or deficient ferritin levels within our body, which would all generally lead to the anemia and deficiency of the iron and the proteins within our body, which will then consequently lead to the hypoxia, high acidity in the body, low production of hormones, low energy, and that will entail sluggishness and slow thinking and exhaustion and so on, and even the emotional, psychological inconsistencies. So everything flows basically out of that. When we talk about iron, we understand the particularity of that element to the physical body. So we are speaking in the physical plane. We do not go into the mind, into the mental plane, even though we will touch upon this topic later when we get to it. But let's just talk about the iron within the realm of the physical body and the physical body metabolism. So we'll begin with what the iron is used for in our body. Just a quick overview. Everybody knows that the iron builds the hemoglobin, and that is the main protein that contains the iron for the construction of our blood cell erythrocyte. And we also have the iron, which is part of the myoglobin. Myoglobin is the protein within the muscle that contains the iron as well. And the hemoglobin participates in the conduction of oxygen to the tissues and removing all the dioxide from the tissues. And of course, it is a mostly important function. Mainly, we know about the iron and the need for the iron in our body. But we less know about the iron being very important in the construction of other blood cells, like the white blood cells, leukocytes and lymphocytes, because they are the immune cells and very important in the immune system. And iron is also used for the creation of those cells as well. And when we have low iron, our immune system is also down, and all the cytokines and macrophages, the immune cells, they're suffering and they're low count, and therefore we may be predisposed to frequent infections and things like that. The next thing is that we also need the iron for hormone production, all the steroid hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, the adrenal hormones, and the thyroid hormones. They all depend on the iron content. And if we have the deficiency, then we do not have enough of hormones, which will then lead to specific deficiencies and slowed metabolic processes within the body, slowed response of the endocrine system, which then leads to slow response to the neurological system. And therefore, we may develop some conditions that don't help us, make us slow and make us sluggish, make the metabolism low, meaning the processes are slowed down, and we accumulate lots of waste products, and the quality of life suffers, and mental focus is very low as well. So that has a lot of problem that rolling out of this condition, as well as our mitochondria, which is the ATP production center within the cell. Every cell has mitochondria, the organelle that produces the energy, that exchanges the energy. There are two main ways of energy production. We are talking about the basic way of energy production, the one that we all relate to, because we all eat physical food. There is another type of energy production, but that doesn't concern us particularly right now within this conversation, because that type of energy production is prana-based, and it's a complete different physiology for that. And maybe someday we'll talk about it, but that has nothing to do with our conversation today. So let's just think of the baseline physiology. and know that mitochondria produces our energy and it consumes high amount of iron, and therefore iron is also very needed for our energy and warmth production. It is very important in people who are growing, in younger generation, in people who are sustaining great amount of stress, physical stress, who work physically, who work out, the people in sports, the athletes, breastfeeding moms, they would also need the higher quality of iron. So those groups of people who require higher amount of iron. This is what the iron is needed for in our body. And let's now see what prevents the iron from being metabolized properly within our body. Next slide, we'll talk about the causes that prevent the iron metabolism. We will begin with stipulating some of the major causes of poor iron absorption, and that would be poor iron and what happens with the journey of the iron through our body when we have certain conditions that block the iron circulation within the body. So, of course, number one, because we get our iron through the nutritional sources and supplemental sources. And of course, poor nutrition, poor digestion. That's number one that blocks or causes the iron deficiency. Now, the poor nutrition, let's begin with that. What is poor nutrition? Is the nutrition that has the very low iron content. And other than the iron, we also need some of other nutrients that need to be present in our body in order to have the iron being absorbed in a correct way, because iron doesn't do it alone. It needs the favorable environment that's created within our body to be utilized and absorbed in a proper manner. Number one is that in the high acidic environment, the iron doesn't absorb well. And nutrients that are not provided along with the iron will definitely affect the iron absorption. What we need is a number of minerals, such as magnesium, for example, and zinc. We need selenium and, of course, silica. Those are supplemental minerals that help the absorption of iron, and in the nutrition that lacks those elements, the absorption of iron will be reduced. In fact, that nutrition would normally consist of the refined carbohydrates or just the type of foods that increase calories. So it's basically the caloric type of diet, nutrition, which has carbohydrates, a quick energy, and has less of the nutrients such as the essential fats and the essential amino acids, as well as some of the polysaccharides, like beta-glucan, for example. That is a polysaccharide that helps the mitochondrial metabolism, that actually boosts the iron concentration too.
I'm sorry, Dr. Nature, are you mainly talking about things like white rice, glutinous, flour, baked products?
If I need to specifically list the products, I can, but I'm just talking about general categories. Okay, so the poor nutrition is the nutrition that we normally see people pursuing. Sweets, savory products, some overcooked and overly exaggerated cooking processes, excessive combinations of various ingredients, something that is complex and controversial in terms of the composition. Carbohydrates and proteins mixed together will end up as a poor absorption of nutrients, as well as the high accumulation of metabolic waste products, which then blocks the absorption of nutrients. When we talk about nutrition, we can break it down into the empty calories and nutrients. Nutrients, they are restorative type of nutrients that actually help build the tissue and make it stronger. And the caloric type of nutrition is the burning fuel for the tissues to sustain the activity. And that fuel, when it's over exaggerated or it's not a good quality fuel, can actually affect tissues, wear it and tear it. White flour, refined sugar, things like that, white rice, whatever you just mentioned. For the good absorption of iron, we require good enzymic content and good acidity in our stomach juice, which if we start having some symptoms of poor absorption, we may further block by taking antacids and some other drugs, and some other medications are also mentioned here. As you see, like antacids would block the good quality digestive juice, which will then affect the breakdown of proteins and the extraction of the iron for the good absorption. So, and another thing is the over-counter non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents. They are also blocking the good absorption of iron, as well as the prescription ones like painkillers and antibiotics, of course. What antibiotics do, they affect the microbiome, and that is another very important phase for the iron absorption. Our digestion is actually made of two major, well, actually three, but two initial major stages. The first is the enzymic stage, and the second is the biotic stage. So both stages need to be well balanced. The first enzymic stage needs to also be viewed from two perspectives, is the enzymic stage in the stomach, which needs to be very high acidic and very quality acidic in order to first break the proteins down to amino acids and remove the parasites and some fungal infection, some bad bacteria that gets in with the food in our stomach that needs to be neutralized by our stomach. And if the acidity is low, then these things are not quality processed. Then another enzymic stage is within the small intestine, and the liver needs to also be adequately working along with the pancreatic enzymes in order to further break down food essence to even more basic structures in order to subtract the iron in the form that we need in order to be absorbed in a quality way. So, and then of course the biotic stage. The biotic stage is very important because then that provides us with vitamin B, especially B12, which is needed for methylation of amino acids in order to boost the protein production, the good quality protein content within our body, because the lower the protein, general protein in our body, the lower the iron will also be. So it's very crucially important that the quality of protein that we provide to our body is the adequate and good quality. And of course, the birth control pills and the antidepressants and analgesics of any different types, they affect the absorption of minerals, specifically iron. Oncological conditions, they are the ones that increase the acidity within our body, and that causes the lack of iron and deficient protein. And that is considered to be either the effect of the low iron or it causes the low iron, which could be the vicious circle where one entails the other. So GI conditions and the ability to digest, like I said, when we crave and consume the improper nutrition for decades, then of course our digestive tract loses the ability to absorb and digest the trace minerals, the micronutrients, and it mostly operates on the level of gross nutrients, and our intestine becomes loose and leaky gut syndrome, bacterial overgrowth, which then can also mask some of the improper symptoms of iron deficiency. For example, with vitamin B12, there could be some conditions, but they would also be connected to the quality of our digestive power, as well as the microbiome being adequately optimized. And of course, the parasites. The parasites is a separate conversation, but it's a huge deal in order understanding why we may be iron deficient, because parasites alone, they take a lot of blood, they suck a lot of our blood, which is the iron, and this is where we get the anemia, and that may go unrecognized. The presence of parasites are largely unrecognized, and just because we have a hard time tracing and tracking the parasites down in our system does not mean that they are not a problem. They don't pose the problem. It's just that we don't have the good diagnostic techniques how to catch the parasites quickly, and not only in digestive tract, but within the entire body because of their cycles, the cycles of their reproduction. This is why we need to, first of all, do more frequent tests, non-present of parasites within digestive tract specifically. That makes us do some other type of tests like blood tests, immunology blood tests based on IgG that can also be phased out, and not even with the blood test, we may not catch the parasites quickly as well, but they may be there in general recommendation, just because we are always at risk of getting parasites, especially people who do not feel well and suffer anemia, especially the unrecognized anemia that doesn't specifically stipulate what the cause of it can be. I would suggest taking the anti-parasitic program at least once a year, maybe twice a year, depending on the type parasitic program, even without having to check for parasites. Doing the anti-parasitic cleanse will definitely help, because anti-parasitic cleanse does not only chase the parasite out of the system, it also supports the immune system, it supports the liver function, and it optimizes the digestional function as well. And the presence of hypoxia, which also can be not only due to the lack of iron, but because the high blood pressure, or it can be some respiratory problems that can also bring about the low oxygen to the body, and that may either mask the low iron, or it may also do the other effect. The body can respond with a higher hemoglobin production. So sometimes hemoglobin can be also be a response of the body to the extreme conditions with low oxygen. For example, like rock climbers, when they go to the mountains, they suffer hypoxia, and as a response, the body starts producing more hemoglobin in order to saturate the tissues with a higher amount of oxygen. But hemoglobin generally is a later sign of iron deficiency. All right, the inflammatory processes and high acidity, that definitely poses challenge in the good iron absorption and circulation through the body. So these are the causes of the low iron in our body. So in order for us to address a specific iron deficiency in our body, we need to establish what is the specific cause for your individual iron deficiency. Whether you have the low iron in your nutrition, number one, whether you have a poor absorption in your body of the iron, number two. Those are two major factors. In fact, they are the primary factors in pretty much most of the iron deficient cases. Usually we do not have the iron deficiency hereditary genetic conditions. There could be conditions that can be hereditary and genetic that would actually show that the anemia and the iron deficiency is genetic. And in that case, it's a different story and different means of treatment and supplementing the iron. Those would be aplastic anemia and myelodysplastic syndrome that would actually create that. But usually people until certain age, about 20 years old, don't suffer any anemia or iron deficiency. And the iron deficiency starts developing only in that later age, like maybe around 30, 40, 50 plus years old, when the digestion and digestive ability of the system becomes deficient and low. And that means that the iron deficiency depends on the quality of digestion of that individual. We need to understand iron does not spread into our blood on its own. It requires a specific protein that transports it, and that protein is called transferrin. The lower the saturation of our serum with a transferrin, the more we require. So there are few indicators within the blood tests that show us what we are deficient on and at what stage we may have the problem with the iron absorption. And the transferrin, which is the protein that carries the iron from the intestinal tract or from the point of absorption into the tissues and into the cells of the body, where it transposes to a different protein which is called ferritin then and accumulates within the tissue. It all depends on just general content of protein within the body. And thinking that when people are eating animal products they are saturated with proteins is also a mistake. What happens with the animal product, they are complex proteins, very high molecular, tight and tough in their composition, really hard to break down, especially if they're cooked. The protein becomes denatured, meaning that the structure of that protein hardens and becomes rigid, and that pretty much no digestive juice can break that protein bond anymore, or can do it at a very scarce ratio. That means that the fragmental structure of that protein will be retained, and that fragment can penetrate into the bloodstream through the leaky gut, because the gut permeability is also disturbed, and it can now allow larger structures, proteins, to get inside the bloodstream. Once these fragments get inside the bloodstream, they're not iron yet, and they're not proteins yet. I mean, they're proteins, but they're not amino acids yet. And there's no digestion going on in the blood any further, because all digestion has ended within the intestinal tract. That means that all these higher structures will be viewed as the antigens and will develop the inflammatory response. That means the accumulation of pus, accumulation of decomposition and decay within the body, bringing about the inflammatory process, autoimmune process, harboring of the heavy toxic waste products within the body, increasing the acidity, bringing the level of the iron down. We think that we're taking iron, but instead of that, we are actually doing ourselves the other favor. Okay, so I think we are on where the, okay, yeah. So we require the protein in order to transport the iron through the body. The transferrin can actually be at a low quantity. That means that the entire just general protein within the body is low. That's what it means. If we see the transferrin levels low, that means that we may need to consider boosting the protein content. That means that we need to get rid of the carbs inside our body and start doing the restorative nutrition. Okay, the restorative nutrition will provide all the spectrum of the essential amino acids as well as inessential amino acids, and that's the body will utilize in order to reserve some of those building blocks for the transferrin, and then adequately start providing the transportation of the iron to the tissues. Once the iron reaches the tissue cells, it is overturned to ferritin, and the ferritin is the intracellular type of protein that collects the iron. It's like a treasure chest of iron, but that treasure chest sometimes may be also empty. So we also need to know whether the ferritin, because sometimes the ferritin level can be low, and if the ferritin level is low, that means again just the general protein needs of the body are not met. Usually it doesn't happen unless, of course, there are reasons for that, like blood loss or disease that the person has just had and recovery phase, they may have that, or after the surgery, things like that, where we need to quickly restore the protein content and restore the amount of ferritin and transferrin as well. Ferritin level can also be faulty, high. We may think that it's enough of ferritin, but especially after the inflammatory conditions or some sickness, flu that just happened may actually mask the high level of ferritin. That can also be faulty. Always take the blood tests when we compare all the components, not just go by one, thinking that if we have low ferritin that we iron deficient. That can also be misleading. So we need to also check the hemoglobin and transferrin levels at the same time. And then the ferritin, we need to know whether the hemoglobin is being produced adequately within our bone marrow. And that actually will show us what we know as the red blood cells count, as well as the white cell count. The white cell count panel can also show whether we have the inflammatory process and the level of protein within our body, whether it's adequate or low. And of course, the type of red blood cells, because there can be some young blood cells, reticulocytes, and the mature cells, erythrocytes. And we can see by the corpuscular volume whether they have enough of the iron within its structure or it's lacking, in which case the erythrocyte would be a shrinking small cell. And if we are deficient, let's say, on the cofactors, which I like calling them for the iron absorption, such as vitamin C, vitamin B complex, vitamin D, omega-3 especially, if we see the irregular shape of the erythrocyte and the larger structure of it morphologically changed, then we know that we have some deficiency of those vitamins. Or, which is the last case scenario, we may have some hereditary genetic conditions that affect the composition of our red blood cells. But if it is the genetic condition, then the anemia would be established early in life, like in childhood. With the genetic conditions, the person would already know that they have some genetic predisposition for low iron. But other than that, everything is acquired through life and through poor nutrition, poor absorption of iron, and lack of right type of buffering system in terms of cofactors and other minerals. The signs of the low iron are very general. There's hardly any sign that will tell you exactly that you have low iron unless you go into the blood tests and then you establish exactly that this is the low iron. And even with that, you would have to look for the exact cause of the low iron, which you will then find in those causative factors that we've just mentioned for the most part of it. Okay, and the signs would be general, like I said. It would be poor concentration, fatigue, and apathy, very low energy, slow thinking, sluggishness, poor depressive moods, unhappy moods, pale skin, being unhappy, being depressed, feeling less of the vitality and the energy. The tissues would be very fragile, especially that would be seen through the nails, through the hair, through the skin. Low immunity, poor resistance to infection, frequent colds, flus, shortness of breath because the low oxygen amount, of course, and poor activity tolerance. And then it would be some shift in the color of the urine. It would be more like towards the pinkish or reddish colors, and muscle soreness because low oxygen triggers the production of lactate, and that is the lactic acid, which brings about high acidity and the muscle soreness consequently. So that's another sign. General not feeling well. That can also be the signs of any other conditions when you're sick, especially when you may have the parasites. They can be very close to that, or oxidative stress. That could also be very similar to that. That brings down the immunity and make you feel a sick person. Iron deficiency would probably be one of the factors that is present in many other conditions as well. All right. So here we see how the iron is transported through our body. So we have the iron that gets with the food inside our body, and we have some food groups that are very high in iron. In fact, they're very common foods, and we do not have to suffer the lack of iron if we eat the balanced diet. We should not even be concerned with the iron deficiency in our food if we are eating the good nutrition. That means that we are having enough of greens, good quality fats, enzymes, and good quality of proteins. And we have the balanced carbs or less amount of carbs. The carbs are not bad. It's what humans done with carbs. That's what's bad. But if we were to go with the whole grains even and not over exaggerating that in our diet, then we would be well off with it too and would not experience any inconsistency with our digestion, because whole grain is not the type of carbohydrate that makes you crave for more carbohydrate or makes the insulin spikes, because it's balanced and takes care of the insulin in a balanced way without producing some craving effect and craving for more carbs. And if you have the adequate physical activity, then you're burning your carbs quickly enough, burning them completely out and not accumulating the glycogen and breaking down the fats. This is the good effect. In fact, this is the good effect for us to restore our tissues, is when we need to clear out of the glycogen and the reserves of the fats. And this what the detox is based on. When we are detoxing and restructuring, reconstructing our tissues, reoptimizing the tissues, rebuilding the tissues, rejuvenating our body, we are removing all the glycemic content, meaning we are removing the free sugar from our bloodstream. We're removing the glycogen from our muscle and from the liver, and then we get down to breaking down the fats. This what actually improves our digestion, improves our metabolism, gets rid of the glycosylation in our body. The more carbs we take, the more glycosylation we experience. For example, the hemoglobin. You've heard of glycosylated hemoglobin, hemoglobin A1C, which is the definition for the predisposition of the metabolic syndrome, which is the diabetes. We know about that. And this what happens with the hemoglobin. It gets glycosylated and it has the problem with the gas exchange. So we want to reverse that process, and that what we achieve when we're doing the detox. So detox is the great answer to the iron deficiency problem and the improper digestion problem. Okay, so the iron then gets to transferrin. It's transported to the tissues where it's taken over by ferritin. And on each step here, we need to understand whether this metabolic process is aligned and balanced. So the first, we know that is good, then we're not losing iron in transferrin, then we're not losing iron in ferritin, and then we're not losing iron in hemoglobin production, and we're not losing iron in erythrocyte production. If we make sure that all these steps are well regulated and balanced within our metabolism and production of the red blood cells, then we know that we should be adequate with our iron and hemoglobin quantities within our body. We should not experience any anemia or any deficiency. Anemia is a later sign of the iron deficiency. The body will do everything in order to sustain the hemoglobin production, even when it's running out of the iron reserves. And this is what we need to really pay attention to, how our body is absorbing and storing the iron before it gets to the hemoglobin as the final stage, as the blood cell. And what is the cofactors that we need to also have in our body in order to create the good reserves of iron and good conversion of iron into the hemoglobin, into the proteins that are required by our body, are these main, I would say, 6 factors. Number 1 is the vitamin C. When you see the supplements that say iron with the vitamin B, that may not be the best supplement. So always go with just the iron, pair it up with vitamin C. The best way to take iron is once a day, in the morning if you are taking the iron supplements. The iron form that you take in supplemental form can be the inorganic, which is the ferrous sulfate and phosphatates and carbonates. They are inorganic. They are like harsh salts. We do want to introduce the organic form of iron into our system right away, and that would be iron glycinate or citrate. That's the organic form of iron that we would really like to go with. Take it once in the morning with the vitamin C, which can be your orange juice or grapefruit juice, something that has the high vitamin C amount. Otherwise, the iron should be in good supply in the nutrition that you're eating within your vegetables and greens. Some of the products that contain high quantities of iron, for example, like some grains and some legumes, they do contain iron in them, but they also contain some lectins and anti-nutrients, and they're mucus producing, and they affect our digestion in a negative way. Also, they produce the higher chance for leaky gut, and they feed the conditionally pathogenic part of microbiome, which in the end decreases the absorption of iron. Even though kidney bean, for example, already has the high content of iron in it, but the effect of the kidney bean on digestion is that it will slow down the absorption of the iron. Those type of nutrients I would not consider as the good source of iron, especially for people whose digestion already suffers or who cannot absorb the iron from their foods. Go with the green juices smoothies with the digestive agents or some liquid organic iron supplements. Definitely we need more alkaline environment within our body in order to have the iron be better absorbed. That means we need to start taking some alkalizing agents, raw foods, enzymes, good quality water, and that will enhance the absorption of iron iron. And the cofactors along the iron would be the complex of B vitamins, especially the folate, which is B9, and methylcobalamin, which is B12. So those are two crucial B vitamins to be present. And we want the vitamin D. Vitamin D is the key factor for the good absorption and good digestion inside the digestive tract and within the system. Vitamin D, the one that we take, is not the final version of vitamin D. You need to be transformed to the phase of vitamin D within our body, and we need to therefore also enhance our ability to do so. We need to have our kidneys function well aligned, and we need the cellular metabolism also cleared out and boosted, enhanced in order to absorb the vitamin D. And the omega, so our red blood cells, they need to be very elastic. They're like spongy. They need to be spongy in order to absorb the oxygen, and they need to be also spongy in order to be able to penetrate into the very microscopic lumen of the blood vessel in the end of the terminal red blood cell need to carry the oxygen into. So it has to be elastic and has to be soft and very flexible. And for that purpose, we need the good quality processing system within our body, which is enriched with the cofactors, which is the vitamin B, that what makes difference, and omega-3 especially, but omega-3 to 6 ratio is very important. So we want those cofactors be present in order to have good structure of our red blood cells to sustain good oxygen metabolism. And of course, as mentioned before, we need protein-enriched nutrition, and that is based on the amino acids, enhanced content of amino acids in our food, and reduce the content of the empty calories. Here is some of the supplemental sources. Some of the foods that can have high amount of iron include apple juice, grapefruit juice, apricot, beets, chocolate powder, green smoothie. It's a separate topic about the green smoothies being very important with the iron deficiency. Some citrus juices and proteins. Any protein would have high content of iron. We want the good quality proteins. Make sure to take them correctly. Enzymes, they are contained in the berries, antioxidant berries, that we recommend you integrate in your nutrition. You may even do your breakfast smoothie, berry smoothie for breakfast. You can fortify that with various berry powders like schizandra, acai powder. There's like a number of wonderful berry powders, barberry powder that you can put together and put some fruit with it and make it like very tasty, nice, and very healthy berry smoothie in the morning that will produce a great effect on your digestion and the iron absorption. And some of the fruit like raisins, dates, some prunes, dehydrated foods have that. Pomegranates have a lot of iron, apricots, and of course the sprouted nuts and seeds, hemp seeds, any nuts and seeds butters. Make sure they're sprouted so that we have the anti-nutrient content down. Lectins and mucus-producing glycoproteins are reduced and eliminated, but the good content, good quality proteins enriched with iron and folate, they are present, and we get the best effect of those, as well as some of the green proteins like chlorophyll, like nettle leaf. That is an amazing product, especially wild grown nettles. Get that powder, integrate in your green smoothies, you'll be very happy. And then spirulina chlorella, that has huge amount of iron, as well as even B12. B12 is considered to be present only in animal products for the most part, but spirulina has the high adequate amount of B12, and so that we don't need to go to the animal products. People who would use animal products, that's fine, there's their choice, and they're using their products where they find vitamin B12, but for vegetarians and vegans who don't know the source of vitamin B12, they would be in the probiotics. So the more balanced your microbiome is, the better you're up with vitamin B12. And the vitamin B12 is also present in spirulina, chlorella. So use those products and you will cover your deficiencies. Oat straw extract, that's a wonderful immune boosting that has great amount of the health effects. So please use that too. Now we get to the point discussing how mind and the iron are interconnected, because we've defined that iron has only the affinity to the physical body, but how is that on the mental level? What happens on the mental level that affect the iron in our body? Well, number one, that is very easy. That probably can apply to everything else, is our nutritional habits. By our mind, we make our choice. What do we want, or what do we like to eat, or what we need to eat? So what we need and what we want are two different things. And are we lost? What do we need to eat? We know that the health nutrition is this, but do we have the appetite for? No. Do we have a good mood to it? No. When we eat salad, we're unhappy. People are usually who are in their habit of eating unhealthy food and being happy with that, because they're feeding their parasites, because they're feeding their mental cravings. Cravings define how our mind works. If we're used to some unhealthy foods, that will affect our digestion in the way that we cannot absorb the iron. So the choice of poor nutrition will reflect as the poor digestion later in life. Here I show you the kid. Well, kids love sugars and it looks like it doesn't affect them. They can still process nutrients in a quality manner. Even by eating candy, they can still absorb iron from the salads easily. But that is only for some time. 2-3 decades later, their digestive tract changes. Quality digestive process is already undermined. And based on that, we start accumulating the deficiency. We all know that. And don't be surprised. The daily iron deficiency, the one that we find out today after the doctor's visit, is the result of the decades of our improper nutrition or our improper digestion. And then for us to change the nutritional habit comes with a great amount of stress. And we are so unhappy when we see salad. And that happens because we already have the metabolic system in place. So this metabolic aggregate within our system is optimized to function on a poor quality food. And now we want to change that. Well, it's logical. We want to improve it. But our body doesn't catch the logic right away. It will struggle. It will adjust, of course, but it will produce so many vitiations to your mind while it's being transformed that you will be 100 times changing your ways and being down and depressed and not understanding of why you have to suffer so greatly. Be aware of that before you undertake your journey and start changing your nutrition. We advocate for that. We know the right ways of doing these things because we've gone through that. We articulated each and every detail on this path. We can help you, but this is the journey. It doesn't happen in a day, but that's the true way of getting to the right point. We can provide to this process of iron metabolism, like fill the body with the iron supplement. This is what the medicine is doing now. That's basically all it's doing. And then just trying to sustain it only with that. But once it's over, then the entire thing goes back to where it was. But the right way of changing this, when you're rebalancing the entire system, would have to go through complex staged process, retraining your digestion for the new nutrition, where you're retraining the entire body to assimilate and process nutrients in a different quality way. It's a different qualitatively process. Another thing is that hemoglobin is the long-living protein. The erythrocyte can live up to 4 to 6 months. That means that the means of rebalancing the iron within the body does not happen only in 1 month. Whenever we undertake some methodologies to rebalance this condition, we need to sustain the healing regimen for at least 6 months in order to start seeing some changes, watching closely the dynamics the body shows. That's said about the nutrition and the mind. And there's one more important aspect as mind and the iron. but unrecognized. So what happens is that we have the electromagnetic field, which is our bioelectromagnetic field. We call it aura, or we call it the subtle body. It's the repetition of our body, but in the electromagnetic realm. What's that depend on? The electromagnetic field of our body depends on the presence of the metal, because metal is the conductor of the electricity. That means that our electromagnetic field largely depends on the quality of our blood and muscle, hemoglobin and myoglobin. Those two proteins, if they're in deficiency within our body, then our etheric body is also weak and deficient in terms of the pranic content. The pranic content in our electromagnetic body, iron content in our physical body, go hand in hand. Increase the electromagnetic power of our etheric body. That will make our prana to be more conducive throughout the body. This is how it's also dependent. Okay, so this is how the mind depends on the iron. Taking it further into the mental realm, meaning discussing the physiology of the subtle body, and what else we can do in order to rebalance and reoptimize our subtle body and make it healthy. So the health of the subtle body is a very important aspect of the natural health. Well, anyway, so we continue. At this point, we are talking about the solutions for the iron deficiency, and the solutions are rebalancing the digestive power, increasing iron in the diet, reconsidering our nutrition. Reconsidering our nutrition and rebalancing our digestion, they're very connected. We cannot do one without the other. And this is where we start. If we're lacking iron, we will add more iron. If we're lacking vitamins, we will add more vitamins. We will optimize the function of our digestion of the stomach and the intestine by introducing digestive agents, spices, herbs, enzymes, acids, things like that. And physical exercises, we're going to take care of the deficiency of iron in our body. One more thing to add is that the mucus producing foods will block the iron absorption. So anything that produces high content of mucus, and those are, again, the carbs, refined products, dairy products, they increase the mucus within the body. We want to reduce that and just generally reoptimize our nutrition and digestion. We have the solution to all of these steps, and we can help at any point with the iron deficiency. Right now, we're gonna talk about green healing smoothie, and Irina will show you the recipe, and I think she will just take on from here. She will also talk to you about some ways that can help you boost the iron absorption. And thank you for listening, and I hope that you find it very helpful.
So now we will be making this awesome ironclad green healing smoothie. Dr. Nature has been talking at length about what's needed to make sure that, first of all, we have a sufficient intake of iron, and number two, that we are absorbing the iron. So this wonderful magic green smoothie can change your life if you drink it on a daily basis, because it meets all of the requirements. First of all, it's packed with antioxidants, such as minerals in their raw organic form, like spinach, different leafy greens, and it has plenty of bioavailable protein, good quality protein. It has algae, Spirulina chlorella. It has healthy fats in the form of avocado. So it has all of the needed components to make sure that you have enough of iron intake. And of course, because of all these ingredients, plus the lemon, plus ginger, it's very detoxifying. And Dr. Nature was talking about the fact that we need to make sure that our body is clean enough. If we are clearing out the pollution on a regular basis, then our body can absorb the iron better. So, in a nutshell, This green smoothie allows us to have an adequate amount of iron, plus our body will be able to absorb the iron. So how do we make this magic cocktail? It's very, very simple. So what I will be showing you today is enough for a family of four, for example. So it makes 2 to 4 cups or glasses of green smoothie. We're starting with filtered water. This is what I always put in the blender first, because that's what I know exactly how much water goes in there. Then I'm adding a few handfuls of baby greens. It can be spinach, it can be arugula, baby kale, just powerhouse of nutrients, right? Oh, beautiful, wonderful. Love all the greens. Okay, so then to make it very aromatic, we need aromatic herbs such as parsley. Our family loves dill and cilantro, so those are great choices. In the summertime, for example, you can add a little bit of mint for an extra uplift, or you can add basil, and basil actually has a little bit of a warming effect and for flavors. Okay. Now to this, we're adding ginger, 1 or 2 inch piece. Then to make sure that it's tasty, we need to add lemon to it. This is what I'm doing now. It's ready, smelling good. And my palate is already anticipating the taste of it. Okay, so if it's a smaller lemon, you would need a whole lemon. You can also use a lemon squeezer for this, or just use a fork. The lemon is hard, and what I'm using now is a very hard skin. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we're almost there. We also need to add spirulina chlorella. We use this 50-50 organic blend. Absolutely wonderful. It has bioavailable, good quality protein, and also you can add hemp seeds, which is the ultimate protein for a human body, to the smoothie for an extra boost of protein. So as is, the smoothie has almost all of the necessary ingredients, but if you blend it this way, the consistency wouldn't be very good. So we need avocado to make it smooth and creamy. So if it's a small avocado, you need whole avocado. Mhm. And now let's go ahead and blend this. Okay. So there we have it. It's best to use a vacuum blender because it suctions the air out and prevents our smoothie from oxidizing. And also it makes it very creamy and smooth. And prevents foam. Okay, so here's our beautiful, beautiful concoction. You can also, the best thing is to drink it as soon as possible, as soon as you make it. But you can also take it with you, but it doesn't stay fresh for long. Look at this beauty. The aroma and flavor of fresh greens, aromatic herbs, spicing it a little bit of bite of ginger, sourness of lemon, and richness from spirulina chlorella, and it's just and creaminess of avocado. This is a winning combination, you guys. So it's a great way to replenish your iron, and if you do it on a daily basis, it will truly change your life. So cheers. Okay, so some extra benefits of this smoothie is that of course, it's a meal replacement. It can help you with your cravings. It's immunity boosting, improves overall health, reduces the risk of any kinds of diseases, great for the whole family, slows down the aging process. It's very rejuvenated. Helps you look younger, absolutely. Helps with your complexion, with the quality and the turgor of your skin. Helps you lose weight. And once again, it's a delicious, delicious way to improve your overall health, not just increase your iron intake and iron absorption. So, and just wanted to mention that if you're interested in taking your health to a completely different level, and especially if you have iron deficiencies that are so prevalent nowadays, especially among women, look further into detox or anti-parasitic programs, because those are two huge factors that impact your iron deficiency. So, and we provide both. We do regular detox programs, and actually you can just purchase it and do it yourself, or we run guided detox programs continuously. We also offer anti-parasitic programs, so please reach out to us if this is something you are interested in, and if you are serious about saying goodbye to your iron deficiency. So that concludes our today's presentation. I thank you for joining us, and you have a beautiful, healthy, blessed day. Namaste. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.